Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Wonderful, amazing guest tonight. I have to give 3 announcements before we start, because you guys know I just jump right in. The first one is, if I have spent my time to go to your house because you have a ghost problem and you didn't do what I told you and now you still have a ghost problem, this is the podcast for you. Number 2, if I spent my time going to your house because you had a ghost problem and you didn't do what I told you and you still have a ghost problem, this is the podcast for you. And number 3, if I spent my time to go to your house and help you and you still didn't do what I said, you still have a ghost problem, this is the podcast for you. My God, it's so funny how you call people. I'm sure we're going to get into this in the podcast, but let me tell you who my guest is and how I found her. As you all know, Tom Durant, Jen Durant, and Dave Harvey are my 3 go-to people. They are the people I go to first for whatever, the people I respect the most, and the people that I try to adopt and follow their behavior when I'm investigating or whatever. And Jen said to me, I have the best guest for you. And she said her name is Tracy Huffman. And when we didn't have enough time to do the Paranormal Consultation Network, which is a fabulous network that a page that you should go look at because Tom and Dave and everybody spent so much time on it. She said, we handed it over to Tracy. And I was like, oh my God, I have to talk to her because I know how careful and precise Tom and Dave are about what they do. So I am telling you, we're talking to a lady that has her, pardon my language, shit together. I spoke with her yesterday. I'm so excited. She got rid of, she handled problems on her own. And that's what I want you all to hear about raising your vibrations. And man, did she have some trouble. Tracy, thank you for joining me today on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited. We talked yesterday and I was just fascinated. Let's jump right in. Can you tell the folks about your childhood where I guess everything started there?
Well, yeah. When I was little, I was able to see auras and I knew things about people that I probably shouldn't have known. And, I would have moments where I'd be sleeping and I would wake up and somebody would be brushing my hair out of my face or caressing my cheek, and I would open my eyes and nobody was there. And, I would get pulled sometimes by my ankle while I was sleeping, or my covers would get ripped off, just different stuff like that. When you grow up like that, you think everybody has that. It doesn't really seem that weird.
Right.
But then, when I was about the age 6, 7, we moved to Oregon, and my family did, and we lived in a house there in Oregon, and we started having activity there. It was quite an old house at that time, and I'm, 54 years old now, so you can imagine how old the house is now, if it even still exists. But, we ended up fleeing the house one night because the activity got so bad. And what had happened that night was we were all downstairs watching television, and our bedrooms, the 3 older kids, me, my sister, and my one brother, were upstairs in an attic that was converted into bedrooms. And my littlest brother, who was like 2-ish, I think at the time, he was still in a crib. He was downstairs with my parents. Well, anyway, back then, they had those Hot Wheels sets. Do you remember them, where you put a car and it shot it out and it would go around the track and go back and it would get shot out again?
Yeah.
It has a very distinct sound when it turns on. So we're down there watching TV and we can hear it turn on upstairs, and it's hardwood floors. It's an old house. And so my father went up there, shut it off, came back down, and it went on again. And this went on a couple times. And then finally my father went up there again, and he went over and he unplugged it. And then as he went to the top of the stairs to come back down, he said, yeah, now try and turn it back on.
Oh.
And it went back on. And he turned around to look, and he said there was this really tall figure. It was a black figure. And he couldn't make out any details of it, but it was really big. And when he saw that, he came flying down those stairs. And I'll never forget the sound of him coming down the stairs. And he was yelling when he came down the stairs. And when he got down there, he was trying to tell us what happened. And then there was this loud moaning sound that started coming from the fireplace. And it started getting louder and louder and louder, almost where you couldn't stand it. And we're all hysterical in there. My father's hysterical, my mother, my sister, my brother, my littlest brother. I mean, we're all just, and I'm a little kid and I'm watching this. So he grabbed us all up. Yeah, we fled the house. We went to my aunt and uncle's house. We stayed there for a few weeks while we tried to figure out what we were going to do. And my dad and my uncles went back only in the daytime and moved our stuff out. I never went back to the house. My mother didn't. My siblings never went back to the house.
You know, the more you hear, do you think that was like a shadow person, or it sounds like a conglomeration of a lot of things going on?
It was a lot of things going on. For something like that to manifest, that can turn on a car set. I mean, it had to have been, I don't know if it was a shadow person. I didn't see it myself. I mean, but I had experiences as you and I had talked about, some of it I think was malevolent, but then I think there was also like maybe a residual haunting that was going on, because my father had seen a little boy in an old time dressing gown too. And the little boy didn't seem to be aware of my father, which it kind of seemed like that was a residual haunting type thing, a moment in time that kept getting played over and over.
Right. Thank you for that. I forget
I had experiences, where I was sent to go take a nap, and I was laying there and I had a music box that you wind up on the bottom, and then to turn it on, you had to pull this little wooden dowel out. And you and I talked about this yesterday, and, I was laying there and all of a sudden it turned on, and I looked at it and I pushed the wooden dowel back in and rolled back over to go to sleep. And then it turned on again, pushed it back in. And that happened like 3 or 4 times. And then I finally just shrugged and then rolled over and went back to sleep and let it play.
It's like poltergeist there. It's like every little, it's like in that movie, he hits on probably what every little kid is afraid of. And this sounds exactly like it.
Right. But I wasn't necessarily afraid of it, because I was a little kid and I had experienced stuff, ever since I was like, 3 and 4 years old. So, I just I didn't feel threatened by it per se.
Right.
And there were kind of like little trickster things that were going on, like I'd put my shoes by the foot of my bed and I'd get up in the morning, my shoes were gone, and I'd look under the bed and they were shoved way under the bed. I mean, how does that happen? Or you wake up and your covers are jerked off and they're across the room, and, how does that happen too? It's not like I kicked them off and they flew across the room. I mean, but then once we got back to California, several years went by, we moved to Yorba Linda. And then, I think that experience in Oregon really had my parents searching, how did that happen? What was it? So they got really heavily into that spiritual movement that was going on in the 70s, where people were searching, for all, going to seances and mediums and, doing past life regressions. I don't know if you remember all that, but there was kind of a
Yeah, I don't remember in that time because my parents weren't into it, but I know it's very interesting. And I know in college, for some reason, I did my term paper on exorcism. I don't even remember what class that was, but so there was enough information out. Yeah, I think that's when it started, when people kind of started that strange search for answers.
Yeah, it was like religion wasn't enough. There had to be something more. And I think that's what my parents were doing. They were like, there's got to be something. This is real. We've experienced it. What is it?
And they must have been terrified. Yeah, they must have been terrified.
Oh, yeah. And my sister was older than me. She's 5 years older than me. So I must have been, when they were doing all that stuff, I must have been around 10, 11-ish. So she was a teenager. And she went to one of the seances. Actually, it was at our house. And me and my 2 brothers, we were taken someplace else to be babysat, so we weren't there. But my sister said that she had never been so scared as she was during that seance, because they were using our dining room table, and it was one of those big, super heavy dining room tables that had wrought iron and stuff, and the big, giant, heavy, dark wooden chairs. And she said she saw our table get lifted up and turned on its side.
Ugh.
And she said she will never forget it. She had never been that scared in her whole entire life with what she saw. And she never wanted any part of it after that.
Wow.
So my parents continued on with that kind of stuff, which kind of, in a way, increased activity in our own home. That's when I started seeing people. You know, I saw a man stand in the doorway one night, and it scared the crap out of me, and I started screaming my head off. And, of course, by the time my parents get to me, the guy's not there, obviously, because he's a ghost.
Right.
You know, and just lots of things like that. It started getting to a more malevolent point with me where the getting jerked out of the bed, you know, those hard jerks on my legs or pulled on my arm or, you know, disruptions in my sleep, and that started increasing.
And did your parents acknowledge, or like, I always think it's, can you imagine if that's going on and you had parents that were like, no, that doesn't happen. You're making it up in your mind. Like your parents must have been, I don't know if the word is supportive or they believed you.
No, they didn't believe me, actually. And I thought, you know, when I look back on it now, I'm like, geez, they were into all this stuff. Why wouldn't they,
Right.
you know, believe me? And they would just say, you know, it's not nice to tell stories like that. You shouldn't lie about stuff like that. You know, it was really frustrating. So then you get to the point where you just don't talk about it anymore. You're just experiencing it. You just feel alone. And I think they got scared at one point at the stuff that they were involved in. And so that's why they dismissed me when I would have dreams of stuff that was going to happen, and I would tell them, and then the thing would happen. You know, they would just say, oh, that's silly, or, oh, I don't remember you saying that. Don't talk about that. And I've talked to them now, and you know, I asked my dad about it, and I tried to talk to him about the house in Oregon. He didn't want to talk about it. And I just said, you know, I know you believe in all this psychic stuff. Why did you dismiss it? And he said, it's just easier that way.
God, I feel terrible.
Hard. Yeah, oh, it was awful. And so you start doubting your own sanity. You start going, well, maybe there's something really wrong with me. Oh, I need to not talk about this stuff. Right. So you just suffer in silence, and you just watch this stuff happen, and you know things that there's no way you should know, and you just keep it to yourself. And then as I got older and I got married, you know, I got married fairly young when I was 17, and I was out of the house, you know, and stuff would still happen. I would still have dreams, and I would know things. I would know things about people that there was no way I could know. I would still see stuff. But then I kind of closed that part of me off because I married into a family that was very religious, very Pentecostal, and they didn't believe in such things either. So, you know, my husband really dismissed it for a really long time.
And I have a weird question. You got married at 17. Is this the same husband you have now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be the most, shocking thing of the way the world is today. I'm like, oh my God, married all that time. That's awesome. That is fantastic. So he was very Pentecostal and was also, you never mentioned it to him at all, or you just mentioned it a little and then was like, nah, I can't go this way.
Try to talk to him about stuff, and he would get almost irritated and sometimes angry about it and say, that's not real. What are you talking about? Why are you making stuff up? So I just stopped talking about it, and I stopped, you know, saying, oh, I just saw a guy walk through, you know, the kitchen. Who was that? You know, so I would just look at stuff, and then I would kind of close off for a while. You know, and we were really immersed in church and stuff at that time because that's what was expected. You know, this is how my family is, so you're going to do it too. And so I tried to be this good little church wife for a really long time. And it was just really hard to be in religion and experience this whole other side, you know, of creation that nobody wants to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
So I shut it off until we moved into our current house. And then it was really hard to ignore.
And now so how long have you been in this current house?
I think we were talking about it yesterday after you and I spoke. I think it's been 22 years now we've lived here.
Wow. Okay. And I know, yeah, like we talked about this yesterday, I know some of what happened in this house. And so you guys move in. And so at this point that you move in, you're still the only one that's sort of secretly acknowledging what's going on.
Right.
Okay. All right. And
Yeah.
how quick did the trouble start in this house?
The first night we moved in, and we had almost everything put away by the time we were ready to go to bed. You know, we just had to hang pictures on the wall. That was basically it. We all worked really hard that day. And like I was telling you yesterday, the way our house is set up, the living space, kitchen, and dining room is in the center. And then our bedroom and bathroom and laundry room are on one side of the house. And then the kids, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom are on the total opposite side of the house. So we're kind of separated the bedrooms by the living spaces and the kitchen. So I told the kids, all right, it's time for us to go to sleep. You guys go ahead and you go get ready for bed. And at that time, they were in junior high. I think they were both in 8th grade at that time.
And they had never spoken of experiences up to this point?
No. They had never, said that anything had happened with them. Of course, we didn't talk about that kind of stuff. So, why would they, even if they had been having experiences?
Right.
So they went to go get ready for bed, and my husband and I were in our bedroom getting ready for bed, and we could hear the girls start screaming. And so we go running out there, and they're standing in their hallway, and they're looking up at the ceiling, and I was like, what? And they said, listen. And then we could hear what sounded like an elephant was walking on the ceiling. Wow. And you could follow it. You could follow where it was moving. And my husband was like, what the heck? So we grabbed flashlights. We go running outside. My husband and I were shining them on the roof. We think somebody's on the roof stomping around. Maybe they're friends. Because when we moved into this town, they already had friends here. And I thought, oh, maybe the kids are playing a joke or something. Well, nobody's out there. And so we come inside. My husband goes up in the crawl space to look. Maybe there's some kind of ginormous animal up there or something making that
Maybe
sound.
It's an elephant, really, for sure.
Yeah, a real elephant is up in the rafters. So he comes back down. He's like, there's nothing up there. There's not even any animal droppings or rat droppings or anything up there. It's really clean up there. So we just are like, we don't know what this is. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe we all hallucinated it. Maybe there's, some kind of a gas leak or something in the house that we're all hallucinating. So, we just kind of shrugged it off. Well, what do you do about that? Weird noise. So, after that, maybe things would happen. There'd be some weird occurrence, maybe every couple months, like we'd all be watching TV and we'd hear a door slam and we'd go and look and there's no doors closed. We can't figure out where that's coming from. Loud footsteps out in the kitchen, dining room area. In the middle of the night.
You had to have had the creeps during this. Did you kind of feel like, I know what this is, and you couldn't say anything?
Well, I'm pretty logical, so I always go and look for a rational explanation for something first. I'm like, well, maybe, I try to kind of dismiss it. But really inside, I was like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
There's something that's not right. And the bedroom that my daughter was in the front of the house, my oldest child. And you just got like a really weird feeling when you would go into that bedroom. It was like a heaviness there was a heaviness and kind of like an electricity feeling or something. And, our oldest daughter, she was always really, bucked authority and, was very social and outgoing. And so once she was in this room, we started seeing a change, over time, of like kind of a depression, which she had never really been depressed, and aggressive behavior, getting real mouthy with us all of a sudden. And you kind of dismiss that because she's a teenager, right? And that's what they do.
Yeah.
But then I started finding books, darker books, like that book, Go Ask Alice, and like just really dark stuff I would start finding in her room, and lying and all that stuff, which is, again, typical teenage stuff.
But you do know your daughter. It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah.
Right. She was always really like a happy, always wanting to be around friends and stuff like that. And then slowly it starts changing. The way she's dressing is changing. And you just always kind of dismiss it like, well, she's a teenager. She's just trying to figure herself out, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So as things are going along and the years are clicking by, she got really heavily into drugs. And one day I go in her room to put laundry away, and there's an altar set up in her room. And I was like, what the heck is this? Oh, no. So I grabbed all the stuff and I took it and I just threw it in the trash. And she came home and she got real mouthy with me and aggressive. And she's like, where's my stuff? And I said, I don't know what you're doing in there, but it's over now. I threw your stuff away. You're not getting it back. I don't want to see that crap in my house again.
And I want everyone to make a note of that we're going to come back to this later, that you threw everything out. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I threw everything out. A couple days later, it's back in her room. And so I thought, oh, hell no, this isn't going to happen in here. And so I grabbed all the stuff, and this time, and I know better now, I shouldn't have done this, but I took all the stuff out and I destroyed it, so it wasn't coming back in the house. And I know better now that probably wasn't the best thing to do. Because number one, she's practicing the dark arts in my house. And then number two, you don't destroy the items, because that just kind of, releases it even more, gives it more power.
Yeah, let's take a detour right here and just really quickly. So you, instead of destroying it, and just a quick question, did she put it all back? Did she go back in the garbage and get it? Okay.
Yeah, she told me later after she was grown, she said, yeah, I went out and I got all the stuff out. And she denied doing anything wrong. She said that it was just some stuff she really liked. Like, you and I know what an altar looks like. I mean, I wasn't even into the metaphysical at that time, and I was like, I know what this is.
And also, teenagers are not that organized to have a messy room and an altar. Yeah.
No, but the altar was really organized and well put together. The rest of her room was a mess, but the altar was really good.
Yeah. And so now we're just going to take a quick detour for people that maybe think they had, so let's say the same situation house. The answer is not to destroy it. It's to, I'll let you fill in. I know the red that, when I had a mirror in here that I had trouble with, Tommy was like, just put a red blanket over it, put a red neutralizes. And what tips would you have for parents that maybe find something like this?
When I've gone into people's homes and I've removed negative objects like this, what I do is I use holy water and blessed salt, and I cover the item, sprinkle it on it. I do prayers over it. I do the same thing. I get red cloth. I wrap it up in the red cloth, and then I take it and I bury it. And then the thought is that, the salt and the prayers and the holy water and the red cloth binds it. And then when you put it into the ground, over time, the ground neutralizes it, and then it's not a problem anymore.
And Mother Earth takes care of it, right?
Right. So that's what I do now. If I go in and I remove, and now in hindsight, I wish I had known that back then, because that's what I would have done. And I would have taken it out in the wilderness somewhere, up in the hills where she couldn't have found it. And I would have taken care of it that way. Because when you destroy objects, when you burn them, it's kind of like releasing it even worse.
Yeah. And also, just an odd question, where do you get your holy water? I know, like, some people are not Catholic, but that does not mean holy water doesn't mean necessarily it wouldn't work for them.
Well, what I was doing was I was going over to the Catholic church nearby, and I was working a lot. A lot of people, I was getting a lot of calls a few years ago. And so they ran out of holy water at the church because I was over there filling up vials and little containers of it. And I had to go and do some consecrations in a house one time, and I went over there and it was just dripping out, and I went, oh no, it's gone. Oh no.
That's funny.
And, you're not tripping over holy water in churches, they don't all have it where it's accessible. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do?
I know, due to the drought, we don't have holy water. We have holy air.
Right,
That's what we have.
None. Sorry. So what I ended up doing doing was I postponed the consecrations because I didn't have the holy water, and I went and I did a bunch of research, and I found the prayers that priests use to create holy water, and I make it myself now.
Oh, it's great to know. I'm a Reiki master.
The way I know that it's the same is I have a friend that's really good at psychometry, and that's holding objects and getting a sense of the object.
Right, the vibrations of what the object, who had it in.
So I did a study with her, and I had her come over, and I had all these different clear vials of water, and on the bottoms I had little dots, little stickers, and each vial had a different color dot on it, and she couldn't see the dots. Only I knew which one was holy water that I was used to make, and holy water from a church, and tap water. And I would mix up the vials, and I would hand them to her one at a time, and she would sit there and she would write down what she got off of each number 1, number 2, number 3. Every time she picked the holy water that was made by the church and the holy water that I was used to create. And she always set the tap water aside. And she didn't know why I was doing this. And she finally asked me, what is this? I mean, we did it like a half a dozen times, and every time, same result. And I said, she goes, why are these two the same, but that one over there is awful? And I said, well, this one over here is tap water.
The awful one is the one you drink. Yes.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we said. She goes, oh, God, that's what we're drinking? I was like, yes, that's what we're drinking. And then she goes, well, what are these? And I said, one is holy water from the church, and one is holy water that I was used to create. And she said, oh, that's so cool. And then I started crying. And she goes, why are you crying? And I go, because they're the same. And she goes, of course they're the same. Oh, yes, they're the same. You didn't know. You didn't know that you could create holy water. I said, no. I've been told that only priests can do it, that especially a woman can't do it, that I have no business doing these things, that men need to be the ones that are doing it. And so I was just really moved that regular people like you and I can do this stuff, and it works just the same.
And that's what this podcast is about right now.
Right.
Exactly what you're saying. You're helping. Yes, I was told as a Reiki master we could make holy water, but I always, this is really, see, now you've encouraged me. I'm going to make a holy bath tonight.
Yeah.
Yes. But
regular people can do this. You don't have to go to seminary to be considered holy or have a connection with the divine. Right. All normal people all have the same birthright to connect to the divine as people that have gone through seminary and wear black robes.
Right. So that, where we go. Perfect. That's another one. Okay. So you actually make your own. That's terrific. Terrific. Okay. So, where were we? I could listen to you forever. Okay, so we got
I destroyed all these items on the altar, and then the activity went off the hook after that. I mean, we were being woken up at night, and with sounds of something that got thrown. It sounded like a big encyclopedia was getting thrown across the house, and it would wake us all up, and we're like, what was that? Unbeknownst to me, I was having an experience where I could hear my front door slam sometimes in the day, and I could hear my daughter's voice going, Mom, Mom, and I would walk out and nobody was there.
Oh, that's horrible. I hate that sort of mimic.
Oh my gosh. And it sounded exactly like my kid. And I would look at the clock. I'm like, it's not even noon yet. She's still at school. What the heck is this? Well, then my kids were having the same thing, but none of us were talking about it. And they would say when I would be gone and they would be here alone, they would hear me calling them and they would say, what? And I wouldn't respond. And then they'd come out to find me. They'd go and look in the garage. My car wasn't there. And they were getting freaked out. And they said they could hear sometimes at night. My youngest daughter one morning came out and said, you know, Mom, you really hurt my feelings. And I go, why? And she goes, well, last night we were all out in the kitchen talking, and you and Dad said you were going to bed, and I thought you went to bed. I wanted to stay up and hang out with you guys. And then I go to bed, and an hour later I hear you and Dad out in the kitchen laughing and talking. It was like you just blew me off.
It's like it knows their mind.
Yeah. And I go, honey, we went to bed. we weren't out in the kitchen. And she started getting upset. She's like, why are you lying to me? I go, I'm not lying to you. We were in bed last night. We were not in the kitchen. And then you could see this realization on her face. And she goes, well, there's something I want to talk to you about. And then she started telling me, sometimes when you're not here, I hear you calling me and nobody's here. And I hear the garage door slam like you've come home and you're not here. And then my older daughter started saying, yeah, I've heard this stuff too. What is it? What's going on?
Ugh,
and then I started going, oh, crud, what is this?
Yeah, the door's open now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what do you do about it? I mean, I didn't talk to people about this stuff. You don't talk to people about this. You know what happens when you do. People think you're crazy.
And you know what else? And there was something, the people that moved out of the house before then, like, was there any inclination, or did anything happen with did they, the people bought this place for a month and moved out, or anything like that?
Right. Well, there were two families before us that lived here, and then the original owner who had lived here. So there were three different families that lived here before us. Well, I thought it was strange that the two families right before we moved in, they didn't stay here very long. They moved fairly quickly, within months after they had been here. That's what the neighbors had reported to me, that they weren't here for years. And then the original owner, he was a little Asian man, and he spoke kind of broken English. So we had been in the house a few months, and I had a knock on the door, and I went and opened the door, and there's this little man standing there. And I said, can I help you? And in broken English, he said, I used to live here. And I said, oh, and he was looking around me, like trying to see around me, and was looking in the house. And he said, is everything okay? And I said, yes. And then he just kind of looked around me a little bit more, and then he said, okay. And then he walked and got in his car and drove off. And I thought, boy, that's really kind of weird. And so I told my husband about it. He thought it was weird too. Well, then months went by, and I saw him drive down the street again and go really slow in front of the house. And I went over to the blinds, and I waved, and he acknowledged me, and he kind of sat there for a minute looking at the house, and then he drove off. I never saw him again.
He must have felt so guilty.
He must have been experiencing something too.
Yeah.
And just wondered, what, are they experiencing it too? What was it? And then you and I had talked a few years ago. Somebody had come to our house that was actually raised in this city. And she had said, oh my gosh, do you know what this property was before your house was here? And I said, yeah, it was an orchard. And she said, yeah, that's right. And she goes, oh, it was so weird. I remember back in the late 60s, early 70s when I was a kid, people were in town were talking about how teenagers were coming over here and they were worshiping the devil in this orchard. And there was a lot of talk about that. And I just went, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. There you go. No one wanted
that's
to say that.
Interesting.
Yeah. That is a strange situation to be in. If you have a conscience, is like, I got to get out of this house, probably financially strapped. And then do I dump it on someone else? But sometimes people move in and everything stops. Unfortunately,
right.
Not you, but yeah. So, all right. So you kind of found out what was going on there. So now you've got your two daughters on your side, and you, I'd imagine this was when you approached your husband with the idea.
Yes. And, just like in the movies, it's the wife and the kids that are usually experiencing everything because they're the ones that are spending the majority of the time in the location. And since my husband was really closed off to anything paranormal or metaphysical, we tried to talk to him about it. And then he would get upset and he would say, you need to stop feeding these kind of ideas into our kids' heads. They don't need to hear this. You're causing them to become hysterical. You're hysterical. None of this stuff is real.
Yeah.
So then we just kind of left it alone. I just said, don't talk to Dad about it. We can talk to each other about it, but don't talk to him about it.
And probably whatever was in the house was skipping over him so that this would be worse.
Yeah, because that's how it works, right?
Yeah.
It's about conquer and divide and conquer, right? Let's get, people on edge. Let's get them not sleeping. Oh, maybe we'll, influence them and they'll start getting sick, and then that's going to weaken them even further. But there's usually one person that's not affected at all, which causes a rift in the environment because they're not experiencing it. They're not seeing it.
And they probably pick the one that has the least empathy for the situation.
Right, which is usually the guy, because guys are usually very skeptical, and I am too. Like I said earlier, I will look for any rational explanation for something. If there's a sound, I don't go, oh my gosh, it's
the
spirit.
devil.
I'm like, oh, what is it? Is that an animal? Is it a bird on the outside? Is it a loose board in the floor? What is it?
And most good investigators, most good investigators want to debunk, and especially want to, because it's like, I don't know, some investigators will go in and say, oh, you have a demon, you have to go. And it's like, no, you debunk, you try to keep people calm, and you want to make sure that it is, the wind, or, I know once somebody, I remember, had a mist, and I showed the videotape to Dave Harvey, and he was like, well, I call him Big Brain Dave. He's like, well, certain refrigerators can emit a gas or blah. And he was right. Yeah. He was right. And, so divide and conquer. That's where your family was.
That's where we were. And so years go by, and we just live with all these weird little occurrences that happen, and, things going missing, and appliances turning on by themselves, or, that kind of stuff, and I just always hope, please don't let the stove get turned on ever. Please, please, please. Just not that, because I'd come home and the dryer would be on and nothing is in the dryer. And there was one incident, my daughter and I were getting ready to leave the house, and we were standing in the hallway outside of the laundry room. We were talking, and we could hear the beeping sound of the dryer getting turned on, and the dryer went on.
Ugh.
And she just looked at me, and I went in and I turned it off, and we continued to talk, and it did it again, and then it did it again. And she's like, what is it? I go, I don't know. But all I could think about was, what if there's a bunch of lint in there one time and it just keeps going and going and going and it starts a fire? So then you have to be hyper vigilant about that stuff. Always making sure the lint filter is cleaned out. Nothing is left in the dryer, that could catch fire if it just kept turning on over and over and over.
Yeah, and the stove is the worst. That's the one I leave the house and I worry the stove is on, and I haven't cooked in 30 years. So the stove is
exactly. You're just going, is that going to be the next thing? Please don't turn the stove on, or the microwave, or whatever,
Yeah, exactly.
So then my kids finally grow up and they move out. And then, then by that time, my husband's starting to experience stuff. He's starting to hear the noises, and he's going, okay, well, that's probably explainable. Okay, explain to me, please, how it sounds like an encyclopedia is being thrown across the kitchen at 2:00 in the morning.
Right.
And then, the television's going on in the middle of the night, or when we're trying to watch television, it's shutting off, and we have to keep turning it back on. The ceiling fan was going on and off, to the point where we replaced our television and the ceiling fan, and it still kept happening.
Right. And you can't explain the encyclopedia because the internet was out, and no one uses
encyclopedias.
And
we didn't have encyclopedias. So what's getting thrown across, and by that time we had a grandchild that was around 2 years old. He would stand and scream when he would look into the front bedroom.
That's when you're like, my kids made it through, and now you're like, oh, I can't do this again. Okay.
Yeah,
God.
He would sit and he would look in that room, and then sometimes he would start screaming, and he would point at something and turn his head and howl. So, and then we had the grandkids' toys here, and the toys would go on in the middle of the night, and we try to figure out, how is it going on? How can we turn it off? God. So there was a lot of that stuff happening. So when the kids finally moved out,
and this is years later. So you've already been in this house, 10 years, 15 years?
15 years probably by that time.
And the activity was at that steady level. It wasn't really increasing. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it just kind of stayed that way. And so then we knew a number of ministers, so we thought, well, now the kids have moved out, let's just go ahead and we'll have the house blessed. We'll just have somebody come over and do it. So one of our friends that was a minister at the church we were going to at the time, we said, would you mind coming over and just doing a routine house blessing? And he said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And we didn't mention anything that's going on because, again, you don't talk about this stuff.
Right.
So he came over and he's like, well, what I do is I'll start on the outside. I'll do the perimeter and I'll touch the house and the fences and just walk the property, and I'll do some prayers. And then I'll come in, I'll do each room, and then we'll finish in the center of the house together and we'll close it. And then that's that. So we said, great, perfect. So he goes outside to go and start doing these consecrations, and he goes to the front bedroom, which was my daughter's bedroom. And he goes to put his hand on the outside of the house, and he got an electrical shock as soon as he touched the house. And he immediately came back inside, and he just had this look on his face, and he goes, I want to know what's going on, and I want to know what's going on in that bedroom.
Interesting.
And so then the jig was kind of up, so we just said, okay, this is what's been going on.
Now, this was not a Pentecostal church. This was a church that was maybe more open to this stuff, because see, that makes
it wasn't a Pentecostal church. It was an evangelical free church, actually.
Okay. So they're a little more, it's kind of like, it's another one of those things where he obviously had some psychic or some sort of ability where he picked that up right away.
Yeah, and to get an electrical shock. And he actually told me later that he went directly home, called a friend of his who was an electrician, and said, is there any way that you could get shocked by touching wood siding on a house? Is there any way? And the guy's like, there is no way.
No, it'd have to be grounded.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So he just said, we told him what's been happening, and he went, oh, I wish you would have told me. And I said, well, we don't want to tell anybody this stuff. I just figured you'd come in and do it and everything would be fine.
Right.
And he said, okay, well, now I've got a little bit better idea what's going on. And so he did the blessing, and it was kind of calm for a couple days, but then it was almost like the fire got turned up. The heat got turned up.
Yeah.
So then we had started getting some stuff done on the house. We had the inside of the house painted. Some new flooring got put in. And it was right after the flooring got put in, and we had moved a lot of the furniture out into the garage. So all that stuff had to get brought back in when they were done with the flooring. So we had moved all the furniture back in, and we were like, oh, it looks so great. It's all done. Well, the next morning when I woke up, I was stretching, and then my right forearm was hurting. So I had a long sleeve shirt on, so I rolled it back and looked, and there was a baseball-sized bruise, round bruise on my forearm.
Wow.
On the inside. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at my arm. And my husband's looking at me, he's like, oh my gosh, what did you do? I go, nothing. It wasn't there when I went to bed. And it was raised. I mean, it was a thick bruise.
Wow.
And I was going to the doctor that day for a sinus infection, and my husband said, oh, show him that bruise on your arm. So I rolled it back, and the doctor went, oh my, what did you do? And I go, I don't know. I just woke up this morning with this. And he goes, wow, that's a nasty bruise. You need to put some compresses on that. And, we couldn't figure out where it came from because it was a perfectly round bruise, and a large one too. Well, A couple days later, my husband said, hey, how's that bruise on your arm? And I said, oh, I haven't really looked at it today. And I rolled my sleeve down, and there was an upside down A in it.
Oh.
And I go, oh my gosh, look at this. And he goes, that's a letter. It's an upside down A. And I go, yeah, it is. And so my husband goes, I'm getting the camera. And he went and got the camera, and he snapped some photos of it. And I'm really glad that he did now, because that was one of the things that was helpful when we finally got help and we got in touch with Tom and David.
And there was a little perfect storm of what's going on there, which was you had the blessing, and then you had work done on the house, which is again,
right.
Isn't you? So you mistakenly built a little perfect storm there, but a letter. Oh dear. Okay. You got, yeah.
And so what do? I'm like, oh, nobody can see this. I got to wear long sleeve shirts all the time, cover this up till it's gone. I don't know what this means. What the heck does it mean? And my husband was like, I have never seen anything like that. And I'm so, like I said, thankful he did take pictures, because I still have the picture now.
Ugh.
And every now and then I look back on it and I'm like, wow, I can't believe we went through all that.
And just for the listeners, is it on your blog?
No,
Okay.
it's not. No. I've kind of kept that picture private.
Because, that's true, because for a minute I thought I'd love to see that. And then for a second I thought, oh, that's connecting everybody to whatever it was.
Right. So I kind of keep it private. And even, Tom and David, when I sent the picture, they even sent it to an expert to make sure it wasn't Photoshopped.
Right.
And then they heard, nope, it's real. This is a real photo. It's not been tampered with. And then that gave Tom a better idea of what it was that we were dealing with.
Oh God. Okay. So now I am dying to know what it was, or if there were other letters, or.
Then the activity just got way worse. I mean, my sleep was being disturbed. I would wake up, stuff yelling in my ear. And, one time my side of the bed, the mattress actually got lifted up, and it was making me roll inward towards where my husband was sleeping. And when I went, what is going on? And I kind of looked, I could see the mattress was lifted up. And then all of a sudden it just dropped. And, and my husband is completely unaffected by that. That's the other weird thing. All this stuff's going on. He's sleeping right through it.
Yeah, I've heard that before, of one having the experience and the other one, like, you couldn't wake him if you wanted to, could you?
No. And I would tell him this happened last night, and he would kind of look at me like, really? Then how come I didn't hear it?
Divide and conquer again. Yeah.
Right. Again. So then we're still at each other. Well, then, the whole TV thing is still going on, even though we've rearranged the room and we're trying to figure out how. And so finally he starts going, okay, this is something. The bruise is something. And then he starts looking at me, somehow this is my fault. Somehow I've done something, my parents were into weird stuff, so now it's my fault. So now we're at each other and we're fighting, and, everybody's on edge. And so then I start getting sick, this mysterious illness. I can't keep food down. I'm just throwing up all the time. I'm starting to lose weight. At about the same time, my daughter, my eldest daughter, she's not living at home. She's got 2 kids by this point that are 8 and 4 years old. She has a stroke, and she can't take care of her kids anymore.
Oh, my God.
So then we get the kids. And so now I'm sick. We've got all this paranormal activity. We've got these 2 kids. Long story short, we ended up, we have who we call our son now, which is really our grandson. We ended up becoming his guardian. His little half-sister went to go live with her biological father. So now we've got a child in the house. And I'm sick. This paranormal activity is going on. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong with me. I'm losing weight. At one time, I had lost over 50 pounds.
Wow. And you always look thin. Well, from the picture I saw on Facebook, first of all, you don't look like a grandmother, but you look like you're pretty slim to begin with.
Right. I wasn't a heavy person to begin with. So you can imagine, somebody who's not heavy to begin with, that's lost 50 pounds,
Emaciated, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good look. And I would wear, layers of clothes so people didn't know how sick I was. I was tanning, so I looked healthy. I didn't want people to know. Again, there's like this shame thing, because the doctors are going, we don't know what this is. We've run every test on you. I ended up getting sent to Stanford for testing because they didn't have the equipment here in the Valley to do the testing on me. So I was being seen at Stanford. Meanwhile, I'm raising my autistic grandson.
And did Stanford come up with anything, or they were the same? Like, we don't know.
They finally said, well, what we do know is that you're not able to digest food properly. Your food is sitting in your stomach. Usually your stomach empties between 6 and 8 hours after you eat. Well, mine was staying in my stomach, up to 20 hours.
Jeez.
So then it was creating bacteria that was causing me to be sick. So they wanted me to put me on drugs that I was going to have to take for my whole life to cause my stomach to empty. And I just went, no, I want to try and attack this spiritually. And they just kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I thought, I've got to get into a meditation practice. We've got to get this problem resolved in the house. I think this is what is aggravating all of this.
Yeah.
So I started searching. I started searching the internet. I tried using sage in my house. And let me tell everybody, if you already have a nasty problem in your house, do not use sage on your house.
Do you know how many times I have been corrected on that? And I have,
oh my gosh.
And people, no, but that's what it says on the internet. Da, 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 Palo Santo,
No,
right? Palo Santo.
No, it makes it way, way worse.
Yeah.
It was like throwing gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
It's what I tell people, because the activity got way worse. So I'm starting to get better because I'm starting to search. I'm questioning everything. And then everything started to change for me. I stopped getting sick as much. Now, I wasn't putting weight on, but my psychic ability started really opening up. And that's how I knew that it had changed its focus from me and started going after our son.
You know what, too? I just want to throw this in. I think it'll be a month ago when this podcast comes out, but I just did a podcast with a psychologist in Australia, and the podcast is called Spirit Emergency. And some of it, of course, it's that thing in your house, but also, even as you're saying, your psychic ability getting better, it can be very hard on the body when you have a spirit awakening. So you might have again had that perfect storm of something negative, and you're waking up and now you're sick. And I know a lot of people, they get sick without the negativity because of the spirit awakening. So again, a lot going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's really what our podcast is about the spiritual awakening thing.
Ugh.
And what it does to you, because everybody thinks, you're on a hilltop somewhere meditating with a big smile on your face. It's not like that for the majority of the people.
Yeah. It's your body going, what are we doing? Who's restructuring our DNA?
The chakras are opening and expanding, and you're going, what is that sensation? Oh my gosh.
I don't like change.
Walking around with a headache all the time where your third eye is, go, what? Oh my God.
Yeah. I went from, I read tarot, and I went sort of my business exploded to where even now I do 4 and 5 readings a day. And if I'm not properly grounded, I swear to God, my eyes are crossed. And my hearing gets funny. Like what's across the room sounds like it's in front of me, and what's in front of me sounds like it's down the street. And so there's so much there. So go ahead. No one wants to hear my story. So you started so then you figured the thing turned.
So then I had a dream one night, and we were in a dark place, like a castle, and my son is standing there. And at that time, he wasn't even 10 yet. He was going to be turning 10. And so he was like 9 years old, and just this little angel, freckled face, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little angel, never aggressive or anything towards me and my husband ever. And he's high-functioning autism. So I see him in this dream. He's got black eyes. He's speaking in a really mature way, saying kind of provocative things to me. Mm. And then he pulls out a knife, and he comes at me, and he's trying to stab me, and he's incredibly strong. And I'm fighting him off, and he's laughing. And so I wake up, I get jolted out of my sleep with this horrible dream. And I had to be at Stanford that morning. So my husband was taking him to his daycare. It was in the summertime. And so I go to my appointment at Stanford, and on my way back, I start thinking about this dream. And I started thinking, what if that's a warning? What if this is what's really happening, and I just don't know about it?
Right.
So he was in therapy at that time, and I had observed how his therapist would question him without leading him. So I thought, maybe I need to have a conversation today and just kind of find out, is something bothering you? Because he was a really tight, closed-mouthed kid. Like, he was tight-lipped.
Right.
And so I go to pick him up at the daycare, and I met with one of the instructors, because this was a facility. It wasn't a home daycare. And they said, we need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, gosh, what is it? And they said, we had a really bad day today, and this is what happened. And he had slapped the child across the face. He had thrown a chair. He had spit in a kid's hair. and he had verbally assaulted the staff, and they said he's saying these really mature things. He doesn't even sound like a little kid. And he was saying, I know you all hate me. I can hear it. I can see it. And then I just thought, oh, God, it's gone after him. And so we got home. I sent him to his room to go decompress. And then I just was pacing in my room going, what do I say? What do I ask? What am I going to do? So I just went in and I said, hey, buddy, I want to talk to you. You're not in trouble. I want you to understand you're not going to be in trouble, but I need you to be absolutely truthful with me when I ask you these questions. And he said, okay. And I said, I'm just wondering, sometimes do you hear any kind of voice that, like we all can hear our own voice in our head, but, sometimes do you maybe hear a different kind of a voice that's not like your own sounding voice? And he goes, no. And I looked at him and I could tell he was lying. And I said, is that the truth? And he just looked at me and he hung his head and he goes, no. And I said, what is the truth? And he goes, the truth is yes. And I said, oh, and I'm acting like it's totally normal. I'm not acting upset.
Right. You're not going to freak him out.
But inside my heart is beating like crazy because I'm like, no, please, please, no. And I said, oh, really? I go, what kind of things does the voice say? And he said, well, it tells me that the Holy Spirit is a liar, that it lies to me. What's a Holy Spirit? And then I knew. I was like, oh my gosh, that's blaspheme. Wow. Okay. And I said, oh, and then I explained what a Holy Spirit was. Because at that point, we weren't going to church.
Well, it sounds like you had enough going on just being sick. And yeah, there's a lot.
Right. I mean, it wasn't like, he had a great deal of, experience. We did start going after that. But for a kid who's never been churched and doesn't really know anything, you say, it says to me that the Holy Spirit is a liar, that it lies to me. What's a Holy Spirit? I was like, oh, gosh. And then he started to cry. And he said, it tells me to hurt you. It tells me to stab you, but not with a little knife like mine. He had a little tiny pocket knife at that time that was like 2 inches. The blade was like 2 inches long. And he said, but not a knife like mine. It told me to get one 3 times bigger. And it told me to stab you right here. And he pointed to his chest and he goes, but not just once, more than once. And then it tells me to stab myself in the same place, and not just once, but more than once. And then he started crying really hard. And he goes, and I don't want to do that because I love you and I never want to hurt you.
Oh, my God.
And so I said, I comforted him and I said, all right, buddy, it's okay. Thank you for telling me the truth. And then I immediately went and got on my computer. His therapist was out of town, and I knew she checked her emails, so I emailed her. And I said, this is what he's telling me. This is what's going on. And so the next day, she immediately emailed me back. And she said, you need to lock all the knives up in the house. Anything that he can use as a weapon needs to be locked up. You and your husband need to sleep with your door locked.
Wow. Now, was she at all open to the paranormal, or she...
Yes, actually she was, because she had been my therapist years earlier. And at one of my therapy sessions, I had said to her, she said, well, you don't know that your husband's thinking X, Y, or Z. And I said, yes, I do. Sometimes I know what people are thinking because I can hear what they're thinking. And if I say something about it, they'll say, how did you know that? And she just stopped and stared at me, and she goes, I totally believe you.
Wow.
And I go, you do? And she goes, yes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe a therapist believes me. Oh my gosh. So she had some dealings with me on that particular subject. So she was open to a spiritual thing, but she couldn't really comment as a therapist on these kind of things. So she emailed me and said, you need to lock everything up. I'll be back in the office on Tuesday. I will make sure we get you in on Tuesday. So then we got him in on Tuesday. She started questioning him, same kind of lines of questioning. And she said, "Is the voice talking to you right now?" And he started crying and he said, "Yes." And she said, "What is the voice telling you?" And he said, "That you hate me, that you think I'm a liar." And she goes, "Do you really think that's what I think?" And he goes, "No, I think you're nice. I think you like me." And she goes, "Yes, that's true." And then she just turned and looked at me. She goes, "We need to talk medication now and inpatient. And this needs to happen today."
Okay.
So then within hours, we were on our way to Sacramento to a hospital that accommodated children. And they questioned him too. He told them all the same things. And they put him inpatient for 72 hours.
And what
that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. And did they find anything, or did they?
They said that it was a psychotic episode, but they said the strange thing about it was psychotic episodes also have violence with them. And they said he's completely nonviolent and compliant. So we don't know what this is. So they observed him for 3 days. They medicated him. They said, "We don't understand how he's still hearing this voice. He's completely medicated. The voice should be gone. We don't understand this." And he saw more than one psychiatrist while he was there.
So they were literally trying to anesthetize him to the point where there was no voice and it wasn't working.
Right,
Okay.
right. And he was even on such heavy-duty medications that they called me one night and said, "He's on this. His blood pressure's dangerously low. We're going to have to take him off of it and switch it to something else because he's almost unconscious. We need your permission." I said, "Absolutely." And so by the time we got him back, he was on medication and he was very sedated. He wasn't his normal self anymore.
Right.
But at least he was able to sleep. He told me he was still hearing the voice. And, but it was almost like he didn't care anymore because he was so drugged.
Wow.
So that was really hard. And the drugs had side effects. You know, he had gained 30 pounds and, he started growing breasts and, you know, so it was just a really horrible, horrible time. So during all of this, you know, we know it's a spiritual problem, but we can't say that to the psychiatrist because then they're going to lock us up.
Right.
And my husband's going, "Oh my gosh, I believe this now. What's happening? How do we fix it?" So then I tried contacting some of the big ones in the business, you know, like Lorraine Warren, Ryan Buell at that time. But at that time, Ryan Buell was going through his own stuff. So I never got any responses from anybody.
And as someone in Hollywood, you never know, even if they got the email or if they get 100 like that every day. You just don't know.
Exactly. And there's sites set up, too, that aren't Lorraine Warren sites.
Oh.
There are sites that look like it. So then you're wondering, well, is this the real site, you know, or is this one the real site? You know, because there's crazy people out there. So I had read a book I think it was called The Uninvited, and it was a similar type story. And in it, they mentioned John Zaffis. And I really didn't know anything about him. Well, one day, you know, weeks had gone by since our son had been in the hospital. And I was watching TV, and The Haunted Collector came on, which was one of his shows. And I was watching him, and I thought, oh, that's the guy that they mentioned in that book. And I just thought, you know, he seems like such a kind, legit man.
I know. He is. Yeah.
Oh, and I thought he doesn't seem like he has a massive ego, and he just seems really nice. And I thought, well, what do I have to lose? I've contacted everybody else. I've tried looking for a demonologist or an exorcist in this area. I can't find anybody. So what do I have to lose? And I knew he was on the East Coast, and I thought, well, maybe he knows somebody. So I just sent him a quick email. All I wrote in it was something like, I need some help finding a demonologist on the West Coast. This is my location. This involves a child. No media, please. And that's all I wrote. And then I didn't hear anything. And so a few weeks went by, and we were gone one day, and I came home, and there was a message, and it was David Harvey. And he said, "Hi, my name's David Harvey. I got contacted by John Zaffis, and I understand you may have a problem. Please give me a call back. I'm here to help. And I sat and bawled my eyes out. And my son's sitting there looking at me. I'm like, no, it's good. This is good crying. This isn't bad crying. I mean, just to finally find somebody legit, you know, I mean, because I had been reading stuff on the internet and I tried the sage thing. It just made it worse. And you get discouraged. You're like, what is real? What can I trust?
Right. And there's a lot of crazy people out there. And I hate to, have my bias show, but you got somebody legit really good. Him and Tommy are so good.
Well, and they, you know, the other thing is I didn't pay a dime for the help that they offered me. That's how legit they are. And, you know, I even asked, you know, when I'm talking to David, you know, because immediately I went in my room and closed the door and called him back. And we sat and talked for about an hour, and I just told him what was going on. And I said, you know, how much is this going to cost? Because I had seen on the internet people charge $2,000.
Yeah.
Sometimes more to come and help people.
And isn't that amazing? Like, poor people should be haunted, but rich people shouldn't. Like,
right, exactly, exactly. And he said, oh, this isn't going to cost you a thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
He was like, no, absolutely not. No, we all volunteer our time. No. And so then that gave them more legitimacy, because I thought, oh, they're not looking to make a fast buck. They really want to help people.
Right.
So he said, you know, I'm going to contact Tommy Durant. He's a demonologist. We'll get some psychics involved, kind of get a feel for what's going on. Meanwhile, I'm going to send you a questionnaire, and it was a lengthy questionnaire.
Yeah.
Very personal stuff I had to reveal. He said, I want pictures of everyone that lives in the house. I want pictures of every single room, the outside of the house, the yards, everything. And so within, you know, a couple days, once I got the questionnaire, I mean, I had that stuff back to them like quick, like within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Practically. That stuff was filled out, pictures, everything sent back. And they joked with me later. They're like, that was the fastest we ever got anything back. We knew it was legit because that was fast and it was complete and detailed. We knew this was a legitimate thing.
And people don't, you know, I'm going back to my initial beginning 3 points. People think somebody's going to walk in and snap their fingers. This is done. No questions asked, blah, blah, blah. They, you know, even Tommy and Dave, all the questionnaire and everything, it's not just to find out. Everybody here has to kind of, they can't drive to everybody's house that just sends them an email. Like, there's a lot to it. And it also probably sifts out, like, if someone doesn't want to bother with the questionnaire, probably their problem is not that bad.
No, and that's what I found too. If I send a questionnaire out and I never hear back from them, I was like, okay, they wanted to mess with me pretty much.
Right.
Because I get those people contacting me too, people that make stuff up or people that want to be on TV. And I'm like, look, dude, I don't have a TV show.
Yeah.
You're barking up the wrong tree. Go find somebody else that has a TV show and try and get them to get you on TV. That's not what this is about. If you have a real problem, I'm willing to help you. But I'm not affiliated with any television show, and I don't want to be on any television show. Who wants to be on TV for this? Do you really? Because
well, not for this. I want to do a funny paranormal show. But yeah, and the only good thing that I do always feel like, not for this, not for anything terrifying, and also, this is just in TV in general, I don't want to see people in distress. I don't want to hear the 911 call. I don't want to see people hurt. You know, that's they have Instagram TV, which I turn on, and the videos just go on. And twice now I've seen someone get shot, and I'm like, no, that is not why I click on your app. You have to have some sort of a filter if the videos are just going to go on. No, I definitely want a funnier vibration to what I do, not a heavy one. But you know, the only good thing about those TV shows is they did make it now it's not shameful.
No, it's more mainstream now. People, oh yeah, you have a ghost. Oh yeah, I feel you. I had a ghost too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as abnormal. Now with churched people, I still get the, you're one of those weirdo people, aren't you? No, I'm not a weirdo person. I'm somebody who lived with really bad paranormal activity for over 6 years.
Yes. Horrifying activity. Yeah.
Yeah. Not just little things, not just bangs on the walls, but actual physical attacks. I mean, I've been held down and I've been struggling and kicking my legs and stuff, and I can't get up. I mean, stuff like that. Really horrifying, terrible things.
Yeah. And I know
waking up to something rubbing the inside of my thigh, and I think it's my husband, and I open my eyes and nobody's there.
Yeah.
My husband's not even there.
Wow. Yeah. I always, sometimes when, like, I do a nice job, I bring this into my comedy in a different way. But when people are like, oh, you're all crazy, I always think, yeah, well, you know what? Wait, hopefully it's never you, but wait till things are moving around your apartment and nobody's there. Wait till something's moving.
Wait till a little matchbox car sitting on your coffee table and it shoots off across the table and hits the wall across from it.
Yeah. Then tell me how stupid I am.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had our little soapbox. Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay. So
I contacted them. They got back to me. They said, okay, first we're going to have you do some stuff in your home. And so what they had me do was lavender. I got some lavender essential oil, and this is what I have people do when I go and walk into somebody's house. This is the same stuff I tell them to do. I put lavender essential oil in a little tiny bit of steaming water. I do 7 drops in a coffee cup. You can hold on to it really good. Not a lot of water in it, so if it's something really malevolent, they can knock stuff out of your hand and cause problems. So I say only a little bit because you don't want to get scalding water thrown on you or anybody else. And just go around and fan the vapor throughout the house, even in closets. And I would go through the house every night, and I did this for I think it was 8 months. 6 or 8 months it was 8 months I did this every single night, this routine, before I would go to bed. And I would do the Lord's Prayer throughout the whole entire house. And during all of this, my son was observing all this, but I never told him why I was doing it. I just said, oh, this is going to help you sleep a little bit better.
Right.
Lavender's really good for sleep, and that's the truth. Lavender is really good for sleep. That's why they put it in baby products. It relaxes you. It helps you sleep. I put a black light in his room. He wanted to know why that was in there. Because, I put it in there because spirits, especially darker ones, have a harder time manifesting in that kind of light.
Now, I had a friend that her husband said, no, we're not having a black light in the kids' room. It's going to hurt their eye. You just have a shade over it, right?
Yeah, I put it was covered in a shade. I didn't have it exposed in any way. It was covered in a shade. It was his nightstand light, and it had a shade on it. So I just said, you don't look at it. You don't mess with it. But it was on, and I said, oh, it'll help you sleep better at night, too. Oh, yeah. Okay. He thought it was cool. Oh, look at my room. It looks really cool now. Salt bath. He had to take a salt bath, and the rest of us did at least once a week. And I said, oh, salt's just really good for your body. It'll help you relax before you go to sleep at night. So he was doing that too. Trying to think of what else we were doing at that time.
Palo Santo?
We weren't doing Palo Santo at that time yet. Because the activity was so harsh, Tom wanted to start with something really soft and gentle like lavender.
Okay.
And then if it didn't respond to that, if it postured against that, then he said that we might go something a little bit heavier hitting. And he did bring up Palo Santo, but anise oil was what he was talking about.
Okay. That's what, came up in a different something I was working on. Anise. And anise is actually an herb. I've never heard of it, but we used it in something, and it's
it smells like licorice.
Ugh. And
it smells like black licorice.
Yeah, and you boil it. You kind of do the same thing you were doing with the lavender.
Right. Okay. Now, I never had to go to the anise per se. We wondered if we were going to, but our home responded really well to the lavender oil and the prayers. Now, there were a couple nights. I only missed 2 nights out of that 8 months that I did this routine. And what I woke up to, it was like all hell started breaking loose in the house. And I had fallen asleep on the couch, and my husband didn't want to wake me up because I was sleeping so good. And what woke me up was bangs on the wall. It sounded like pops, like this popping sound, and like paper was getting crumpled. Like somebody had newspaper and they were crumpling it into a ball, and it was everywhere. I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. And so I hopped up, got the lavender oil, and I didn't care that people were sleeping in the house. I started going through the house, and then it started calming down. And unbeknownst to me, later when I talked to him about it, I said, yeah, I missed a couple nights, and this is what happened. And they said, oh, that's really interesting. Not a lot of people know about that. But, yeah, that can happen. That's interesting that that's what you experience.
You mean the popping?
The popping and the sound like paper getting crumpling. He was like, yeah, that's something trying to manifest. It's something trying to come back through. And I was like, oh, my gosh. So about, when we're nearing 8 months, during this time, Tom and David are trying to arrange to bring a team up here and a minister or a priest to do consecrations in the house because we had neutralized it enough and got it out. Well, just after 2 weeks of doing this, too, it was amazing how fast it happened. 2 weeks after I started doing it, my son came to me and said, I don't hear that voice anymore. The voice is gone.
I do not. People are so. God, I'm sorry. See how easy that was. 2 weeks, you start to see something.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
I was like elated. And then it must have been 2.5 weeks after we had started doing it, David Harvey called me and he said, hey, just checking in, seeing what's going on. And I said, oh my gosh, at 2 weeks, my son came to me and said, I don't hear the voice anymore. And David started laughing. And I go, what's so funny? He goes, well, it's no coincidence that I'm calling you just over 2 weeks after you started doing it, because that's what we see. About around 2 weeks, we see a lift off of the people that start doing this.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh. See, he didn't tell me that. He goes, and I purposely didn't tell you that because I didn't want you to know. I didn't want it to subconsciously influence you.
And to have you stop at 2 weeks, which is
right.
Yeah.
Right. So I kept doing this for 8 months. And frankly, I was getting tired of it. I just wanted this thing gone. I wanted to go back to my life and be nice and quiet. And I just wanted to be normal again.
Mm-hmm.
So they kept trying to come up here, and, this is all volunteer. People are volunteering their time, and they're down in Los Angeles. I'm in the Central Valley in California. So there's a 5-hour drive to get here. So it's not like they can just pop over to my house and do these consecrations and drive it out for good, right?
Right.
So they're trying to coordinate a lot of people who are volunteering their time to come up here. So it kept getting postponed. Well, I got sick of it at one point, and I just thought, I'm not waiting anymore. I want this done. So I got on the internet, and I started researching Catholic prayers, the rite, whatever. And I just thought, why can't I do it? Why do I have to wait?
Who's magical? We're all magical.
Right. So if I've been doing this, if I've been used by the divine to do this and get my house healthy, why do I have to wait for a minister? Why do I have to do that? And frankly, I didn't want to wait anymore. And I even had written David Harvey a scathing letter.
I'm tired of waiting.
There were some expletives in it, too, because I said, I am effing sick of this. I want it done. I don't want to wait anymore. I'm over this. When are you guys coming to have this thing be done? And so I researched prayers, and I just thought, well, it can't make it worse.
Yeah.
So I got candles, 3 white candles, incense, and I made sure my son was gone. Nobody else was in the house. And then I just went about doing this ritual to make it leave. And I don't know what I was expecting. I was kind of nervous at first, but I got to tell you, it was my first time doing anything like that. And the amount of heat that came in through the top of my head felt like it was on fire.
Wow. That's like Reiki. That's where it comes through your crown chakra. Yeah.
Yeah. And my hands were on fire. I had to kick my shoes off because my feet were on fire. By the time I was done, I was completely soaked, like I had been thrown in a swimming pool. My hair was wet. My clothes were wet. My clothes were wet to the point that I was trying to take them off after I was done, and I was having to wiggle out of them. And when I dropped them on the laundry room floor, they made that splat sound. I mean, I must have lost 5 pounds in sweat alone. But I half thought that there was going to be some, like, I don't know, like an explosion or an earthquake or
somebody was going to go,
yeah. Right. Yeah. I didn't know what to expect. But by the time it was done, it was just such a peaceful feeling. And I just kind of walked around my house and I was like, oh my gosh, it feels different. It totally feels different. And, I started crying. I was like, oh my gosh, it's done. I can't believe it's done. I can't believe that me, this lowly woman, could do something like that, because I've been told by people, oh, you're just a woman. You can't do anything. Let the men handle it, honey.
No. Yeah.
And it was just completely different after that. And the only time I do anything in my house now, I mean, I go through and I burn incense and stuff like that now, but the only time I ever really do anything now is if it feels funny to me. If I walk through the door and it's almost like you can smell it.
Right.
Like something funky, like something's off. And it's usually after people have been in my house.
Yeah. See, I do tarot in my house. Most of my appointments are over the phone, but sometimes I'll have people come, but I burn incense almost every day. I burn lavender incense almost every day. I have the salt lamp in my bedroom. Try to sleep with it sometimes because I sleep so well with the salt lamp on. And I do salt baths every time I take a bath, which is probably 2-3 times a week. And it's like I live in an apartment building that's massively haunted and nothing is in my place. Sometimes something will move through. I think there's a residual that moves through, but but folks, and if you live in an apartment, folks, things go apartment to apartment. So just having this nice habit is really helpful to keep the energy up.
Yeah. The vibe's pretty high in here, and I try to keep my vibe really high. Every now and then I get funky and I'm like, okay, I need a salt. And I do salt showers for myself. I just take a big cup and I fill it up with warm water and put blessed salt in it and swirl it around and just pour it over myself in the shower while I do a prayer or do a meditation. And then I just rinse off and shower normally. But when I feel wonky, I do that kind of stuff. But it's usually after, like teenagers have been in the house. Yes. And then I'm like, oh gosh, it feels really weird in here now. But then, through all of this, I got into Reiki. I hold a Reiki master certificate. I have an advanced theta certificate. So I use a lot of that kind of stuff to raise my vibration too, work on my chakras and
meditation. I meditate every day.
Meditation. Yes. Meditation is very, very important. And I tell people, people, especially people that are religious, you'll mention meditation. They're like, oh, that's that metaphysical crap. That's a bunch of BS. And I'm like, you church people, you really like to pray a lot, but praying is talking. Meditation is listening for the answer. That's all meditation is.
Yeah.
So how can you sit there and do all the talking, but you don't ever listen for the answer, and then you wonder why you don't have the answers? Because you didn't stop and be quiet and wait to hear it.
And
that's why.
Yeah, and I don't, like, really, folks, if your religion works for you, that is great. And especially if it doesn't impose on anyone else, have at it, rock on. But I always feel like we've been led to believe that these are mysteries and the priest has to do it and you're not special. And that's all, I think that's what the new age coming in is about. It's empowering each and every one of us, which is what you and your podcast does.
Yes. Yes. We talk about the struggles of it. We're going through it too. I mean, it's not something that you attain one time. You're going to move up in vibration if you're working on it throughout your whole life until you take your last breath. I thought that I would open and just be open completely. And then, the clouds would, the sun would come through the clouds and there'd be rainbows and unicorns and butterflies. And then then meditating and helping people. No, it's a constant thing. And
tell the people what happened to your daughter's bedroom, what it is now.
Well, through all the things that I've learned, now the worst room in the house is now my office. And a couple weeks ago, my husband was working in my office. He was using my printer and my computer. And I do Reiki here in my office and meditations and stuff like that. And I, process, the questionnaires I get and talk to people about their spiritual problems here in my office. This is where I do the podcast with my little brother is in my office. And my husband was in here one day working, and he came out and he goes, "It feels so good in that room. I just love being in that room." And he goes, "Isn't it weird that now that room, which was such a source of pain and fear and terror, is now a light place, and it's where you do work to help other people."
That's beautiful.
And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, that really is profound. And so it kind of puts me on edge sometimes when I watch some of these paranormal shows, and, somebody has a really dark problem, and the psychic says, "Oh, well, you just have to move. This isn't fixable. You just need to go, and you just need to move, and there's no hope for you." And that really tears my heart apart, because I'm like, some people had suggested that to us. And, really, with a clear conscience, I could not leave this house with it being in the shape that it was, because all I could think of was, what if that bedroom becomes a child's bedroom?
Yeah.
What if it's a baby in there?
Yeah. And that exactly what happened to your son is, I always think, I wonder how many people are on death row or in a mental institution that everybody just went, "Oh, he just went crazy." And it's like, no. There's a lot, you know what I mean? Like, I remember the first time I saw a walk-on, it was the first time I really was like, I was anti-death penalty, but I was really like, oh, I'm not, now I'm really anti, you know what I mean? Like, it's, there's so much we don't know. And I hope we're finally trying to leave an opening here for other things than what's in the books now.
Right. And I don't think there's anything that can't be solved. But like you and I have talked, I've had people say, "Well, come in and do your thing so this thing goes away." And I'm like, look, that's not what this is about. I can come in here and I can do consecration, and your situation will change, but only for a time. The change is going to come with you. This is your opportunity. This is a wake-up call for you, because this is what's happening across the world. People are waking up. Some people are spontaneously waking up. They just wake up one day and they're seeing auras and spirits and hearing stuff, and they're going, "Oh my gosh, I've lost it." You haven't lost it. Now you're woke, pal. Yeah. That's what's happened to you. You've done woke up.
Yeah. It's funny. I subscribe to your podcast. I'm going to go unsubscribe just so I can get the excitement of subscribing again. That's how much I like you.
I mean, and there's a lot of people that are suffering like this, and I totally agree with you. I look at some people that are dealing with mental illness, or people, like you said, that are in prison, and I'm like, I bet there's a spiritual aspect to this, is, what's going on. Yeah. And I worked with a family, and what was going on with that family was, it was a little of both. What I was getting and what I was being told through spirit was that there was this beginning of a mental illness starting, a chemical imbalance in the brain, but there was also something malevolent there, and it was playing the person. It was using that budding mental illness part to play the person and cause them more suffering.
Wow. So it's, that's,
And I always tell people, go and see your doctor first off. You need to go and you need to get a physical. Make sure there's not something wrong with you physically. Go and see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Make sure you're okay in your brain. Make sure there's not an imbalance in your brain. Because, I've had people referred to me before, and I've had other practitioners go, "It's a demon." I went into one home, and I'm like, "Honey, you don't have a demon. What I'm being told is you're sick. You need to go and get some blood work done at your doctor, and they'll figure out what's wrong with you, and you need to be treated that way. You don't have a spiritual problem."
Yeah,
that practitioner was furious with me. And she went to the doctor, and this woman calls me like a month later. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you were right. I had a yeast infection in my bloodstream."
Wow. Wow. Who knew Monistat 7 could fix the demon
Exactly.
problems?
I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you could get, I mean, I knew it was something that a blood test would reveal. And she's like, they treated me for it. All those weird things that I was experiencing are gone now. You were right.
Well, you know what, too, though? We've become so lazy in life. And sometimes I see people that actually, sometimes I think when, you go and you help them out I've never handled cases like, I want to say too big. Like I'll call Dave or Tom if I'm like, yeah, that's out of my wheelhouse. This is who we need to talk to. And I always learn as I go, but I'm always careful. I'm not going to step in somebody's house and cause trouble when, you know what I mean? Like everybody know your level and be okay with it. I do see with Reiki, a lot of people that are, perpetually depressed and enjoy being a victim or do not want to change or do not want to understand that life is about getting your vibration higher. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Right. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, this isn't a magic thing. Okay. The consecrations on their own are good things, but you have to change internally. You have to start pursuing a spiritual type walk, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah. Yep.
But you have to take care of the inside of you and raise your vibration. Stop watching the negative movies. Stop reading the negative stuff. Start listening to happy music. Start reading happy things. Watch happy movies. Get outside in nature. Get your hands dirty. Get your feet dirty. Go walk on the beach.
Yeah.
Get in sunlight every day. Open your blinds so that the sun can come in your house. Eat well.
Yes, that is such a big one. My neighbor always has trouble, and I walk in her house, and I'm like, why is everything shut? Why are you
right? Exactly.
It's you hate to be cliche, but it's really that simple. It's really that cliche. Is brighten up everything, brighten up your life. Well, I was thinking, oh my God, I've kept you here an hour and a half. You're this is fantastic. So right now, tell people what you're doing right now. We're going to make sure they know how you can get a hold of them. All the information is going to be in the description for the podcast, but let the folks know kind of you're doing the podcast. What else? If they have trouble, where do they find you? That kind of thing.
You can search Paranormal Consultation Network, and you'll see my contact information is on the site, as well as Tom and David and Jen. Jen's got some nutritional credentials. If you're having any kind of problems, I would highly suggest you contact her because
she's amazing.
Nutrition does play into this. The cleaner you eat, the better you feel. And if you have any kind of psychic abilities, they'll go off the charts if you clean your act up with your diet. Mm-hmm. You can find me on Paranormal Consultation Network. I have a work email. It's healingenergyworker@gmail.com. You can reach me that way or through the PCN site. You gave them the disturbing behavior information. That's how you get in touch with me.
Yeah. And we'll put all of these. I also have disturbing behavior podcast at Gmail. So there's all kinds of ways, and I'll have Tracy email them to me, and we'll have everything in the description. And God, I'm so glad Jen suggested you. Thank you so much for your time. Anything you want to leave the folks with?
There is no magic pill. Everybody's different. If you're having these kind of problems, just make some of the little changes that you and I have talked about. Try some lavender oil, try some prayers, try, salt baths, get out in nature, start searching, start questioning everything. That's what I did. I started questioning everything.
Yes. And also, and listen to our podcast.
Yes, because we're going to be talking more about this. Our second podcast is on religion, actually, which I hope is helpful to people.
Yes, and also this will be coming out in September. So we'll all be waiting for the book, Tracy. We'll all be waiting for the book.
I'm starting on that. Tomorrow. My brother's been bothering me about that too. He's like, you got to start writing. I'm going to start writing too. Come on, we got to get this down. Yes. Like, okay, fine. fine. But thank you so much for having me. It's been a real treat to talk to you, and
it's great.
I hope to have you on our podcast.
Oh, I'd love to, and I hope to see you in person. I hope I get a gig out that way. And yes, thank you for.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks so much, and everybody. I'm on. Thanks for listening to the podcast, everybody. That is Tracy Huffman, and if you can, folks, leave me a 5-star review wherever you listen. You can reach me at karenrontowski.com or paranormalkaren.com. You can book a reading. You can see my comedy schedule. You can sponsor this podcast. We have a page where you can be a silent sponsor on the sponsor wall, or you can pay for an ad. And I can't think what else, everybody. Thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media. And I know I always forget one. I need to make a list, Tracy, and I just don't. There's one. I'll figure it out next time. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. People are always asking me, Karen, you are so knowledgeable about tarot, ghosts, and otherworldly spirits. How do you stay so organized and grounded here on Earth? And I have to tell them my secret weapon. It's black tourmaline. And Nita over at nitaapple.com. After years of complaining about all the text messages and emails back and forth, trying to schedule tarot readings and chasing after payments, Nita installed Acuity Scheduler on my website, and now I just get a little ding on my phone, and that tells me someone has made an appointment and the money is already in my account. I love that little ding, except every time it goes off, Courage runs to his food bowl. 5 minutes with Nita can save you 5 hours of bumbling around and trying to do things yourself. So if you spend 10 minutes with her, that'll save you like 72 hours or something like that. I don't know. I'm not good with math, but you know who is? Nita. That's who I would ask. Want to end all the emails back and forth and get paid up front when clients schedule time with you? Then hop on over to nitaapple.com/services and let Nita get you set up with a simple system that will make your life so much easier. Use coupon code BOO4U and get 20% off any products or services. She's got a lot of services and products that can save you time and money. That's BOO4U, all lowercase, BOO, the number 4, the letter U, and get 20% off. That's Nita Apple at nitaapple.com/services. nitaapple.com/services, and make your life easier today.